Welcome to For You Radio, where the gospel's for the believer and the unbeliever alike. I'm Craig Donofrio, pastor of Redeemer Lutheran Church in Wilmer, Minnesota. Who are you, sir?
Well, back when I was still alive, I was pastor of St. Peter's Lutheran Church in Shaker Heights, Ohio, and I was known as the Pastor Troy Neer. Now I'm just dead. I've got that zombie virus where you go to sleep and then you wake up dead, and that's what I've done.
It's going to be a bumpy ride, folks. Troy's under the weather.
Currently operating on the basis of caffeine and adrenaline, which always happens to me. I get really pumped up every time I see Craig, and so it's just good. Hey,
Troy's got 2 Red Bulls and a bottle of Robitussin in him. It could get interesting here.
By the way,
seeing things.
I just want to ask you, and I think we might have talked about this before.
Yeah.
But a lot of pastors, and I know a lot of other forms of entertainers, pastors, and then a lot of entertainers will speak about the same way too. Is that you have something called entertainers call it show health. For pastors, I think it's just church health. That I'm sick, I'm dead, I don't know if I can do this. Church starts like I'm up, I'm ready to go, and then church ends. You're like, oh, I'm dead again. Does that happen? You're
more dead than before, even.
Okay,
yeah.
All right, good.
Yeah, it's known as adrenaline.
It's okay, adrenaline. That's fine. I always hoped it was the Lord's protection. Like I'll get you through this, buddy. Hold on.
Well, it's the Lord who created you with adrenaline. That's back when I was a musician. I remember several shows. I had the flu, and I was dying. And boy, as soon as you hit that first note, bing, you're alive.
There you go.
And then, boy, you climb back in the truck on the way home. You just kind of crawl up in a ball, and you pray one of the roadies doesn't drive you into a ditch or something. But you get that bounce. You get a big bounce, and you come alive. And
so we'll see
I don't know why
happens.
rock and rollers need cocaine when they got adrenaline, because it really gets you going.
Sure all that to say, I'm looking forward to what I'm going to say today too, because right now, no idea. Oh boy, yeah,
it's gonna be interesting.
All right, so it might be.
I know
good.
nothing personally. I don't know anything, so this is gonna be really.
I might just fall asleep snoring in the middle of the whole thing. We'll see.
I've been there.
Okay.
So anyway, we're glad that you're listening For You Radio. Once again, we're the gospel's for the believer and the unbeliever alike. If you want to email us, Troy, you got that email address?
I sure do. It is foryouradio@1517.org.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and nothing brand new in the email inbox there. So, we're good.
Well, all I want for Christmas is an email from you, not you, Troy. Our listeners. So
that's all.
Just fire off an email and wish us a blessed Adventtide. And when the 25th rolls around, remember that's when the 12 days of Christmas begins. And you can wish me Merry Christmas for 12 whole days. Wouldn't that be great? 12 days of Christmas.
There we go. That's my Christmas wish, by the way, that no one talks about 12 days of Christmas beforehand, but I already know they're going to.
I just did.
No. It starts about December 14th. 12 days of Christmas. Here we go. Counting down. Like, no.
I see.
Yeah, 12 days of Christmas counts up. There we go.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
It's
Anyway,
not the countdown, it's the count up.
Let's talk about that some other time. Actually, email us about why we think that's true. Go ahead and do that.
Once again, when some parishioner gives me a winning Powerball ticket and I buy a radio station of my own, we will start playing Christmas music on Christmas Eve and play it for the next 12 and a half days. That's the way we're going to roll. It always bugs me that soon as the 26th rolls around, there's no more Christmas music. It's like, no, this is when it's supposed to start. You guys, you play the song, the 12 days of Christmas, and then you stop on the first day of Christmas. I don't get it. It's because you don't know how it works. Anyway, regardless, we're happy to be part of 1517's podcast network, the network of podcast stars at 1517, the constellation of podcast stars. How's that?
That is suitable.
I'm just ripping that off from that thing you do. Anyway, go to 1517.org. Wonderful podcast, 15 or 30 minutes in the New Testament, 40 minutes in the Old Testament. I'm going to do 15 minutes in the Apocrypha, I guess, because I threw out 15 minutes. I guess we got to do something for 15 minutes.
You can't do anything for 15 minutes, Greg. You can't.
I do introductions for 15 minutes.
Apparently so. There we go.
Okay.
So what are we talking about today?
I babble for 15 minutes. 3 John chapter 1. If you got your Bible handy, do open to 3 John chapter 1. Don't go to chapter 2 yet. That'll be later on. We'll go to chapter 2.
Yeah. Look for 3 John chapter 2 after Christmas. Yeah.
Once you get to 3 John chapter 1, you'll see why I'm talking about 3 John chapter 2. And yeah. So, any background? Is there anything you would like to say about why we're talking? Did you lose me? Troy cannot hear me. Have you gone deaf? It's been the Red Bull and the Robitussin have made Troy deaf. He's gone full Rush Limbaugh on me. He's going to need the cochlear implant.
And I'm back. Sorry about that. I hope you guys weren't talking about me while I was gone.
Of course we were. Technology is grand, ain't it? All right. So
sorry about that. I think I've got it figured out on this end. Maybe so. I don't know. We'll figure that out.
Anyway, I'm not sure what we were saying when we were so rudely interrupted by technology, but let's go ahead and jump into 3 John, once again, chapter 1, verse 1. Oh, background. That's what we were going to talk about briefly. The background on this. Troy, what do you have in the way of background on 3 John?
Actually, let me do it the way I would normally do it for my church.
Okay.
3 John, verse 1. The elder. Now let's stop right there. Yeah. Anytime I introduce a new book, it's about 45 years before we actually get to the text. I'm so sorry,
but 6 months to get through a 15 verse book there.
So first off, strictly speaking, this is an anonymous book. It's not, he doesn't say I'm John. He says he is the elder, right?
Yes. And that's why it falls into the camp of that antilegomena. Once again, those books that were spoken against. So they are to play a supporting role in theology, not a primary role.
They're books that some people spoke against, right? So not to get, we have some flat out rejected books that everybody said, no, that's not the Bible.
It's not that.
Yeah. So this is in that disputed book section, which some people said absolutely scripture, other people said, not so sure. Right, and we do ascribe these letters, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, to a guy named John, and there is some dispute as to who this John is. So, strictly speaking, in the scriptures, we have 3 different Johns that we talk about. We have John the Evangelist. He writes the Gospel or the Evangel of John. He writes the Gospel of John. That's John the Apostle. We have John the Revelator. I just love that name because it's also a good blues song. John the Revelator, who writes the Apocalypse or the Revelation of John. And then we have John the Presbyter or John the Elder, who we give these 3 writings to him. Now, the question is, are all 3 Johns the same John? Are they 2 different Johns? Are they 4 different Johns? What? Personally, I am comfortable saying they're all the same John. There's not a lot of evidence to pull one way hard or the other, and I would tend to think that these are all probably the Apostle John. I'm not married to that idea, and not a lot of my faith hinges on that, but I like it.
I lean in that direction also, but I can say without a shadow of a doubt, this is not John the Baptist.
There we go.
He's been long dead. So anyway,
so that's a good point, right?
Yeah.
Yep. So
okay, so this is a letter, hence epistle, and it is. I don't know of any other. Well, no, there are a couple others that are to individuals instead of churches, but this is to an individual, not to a church. But it is, of course, about some headaches going on in a church, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So it is to a guy named Gaius, which, according to my boy Kretzmann, is a very common name. And so we're not real sure exactly who this Gaius is, but the name Gaius pops up several times in the New Testament. So may or may not be the same guy popping up here and there, or probably not. That's like saying that there's only one guy named Bob in the United States. So, yep.
Okay.
Are you there?
Oh, right. Yeah. So we're talking about Gaius. Yeah, there we go. Okay.
What sort of things are popping up on my screen there, Troy?
Well,
Crazy
frankly, you
stuff.
restart the timer after our problem with the audio earlier. So,
Oops.
Yeah. Anyway, and so Gaius writes this guy named Gaius. Oh, were we gabbing? So John the elder, John the presbyter would be the word in the Greek, which then probably most likely translate that this John is what today we might call in the church a bishop. He apparently has authority over several churches, at least several, which also maybe kind of lets us think that's the Apostle John as well, too, right? So he has authority over several churches, and then this is probably not quite so much a private personal letter as maybe more of a formal letter to a church leader of some type. Pastor, not willing to bet on that either, but at least a church leader of some type.
Okay. So there we go. The elder to the beloved Gaius, whom I love in truth. Anything
in
there?
truth. No, there we go. It's just
Okay.
this is fairly standard letter format of the first century. So yeah,
Greetings.
here we go.
Yeah.
Yep.
This is my brother. Love you, man.
Yeah, there we go.
Good. Be good. Loving you. Okay. Verse 2. Beloved, I pray that all may go well with you, and that you may be in good health as it goes well with your soul. For I rejoiced greatly when the brothers came and testified to your truth, as indeed you are walking in the truth. I have no greater joy than to hear that my children are walking in the truth. This is the joy of any pastor when he hears that his flock are following in the truth of the gospel, right? As I've told people in my church many times that nothing makes me happier than when I hear them speaking the gospel to each other and to me. When I hear my congregation tell me that I'm forgiven, I know that they've actually been listening, right? And so this is kind of the same kind of thing. It's like, I'm hearing good things, that you guys are speaking the truth of the gospel. Good stuff. Anything that you could add to that, Troy?
Yeah, the only thing that I really am fascinated by is the singular nature of this letter as opposed to the plural nature of this letter. And I tell my congregation this regularly, like all the yous, almost all of the word you in the New Testament, they're almost all plural. Like every time you listen to Paul as he speaks to the church, he's really saying you all. Here we have a letter in which, like even the beginning, beloved. In the Greek, that's completely singular. He is writing to one guy. So the trick for me, I think, as I'm kind of reading this with fresh eyes, as it were, is to ask myself, what is this book doing in the Bible? If it's a personal letter from one guy written to another guy, what great universal truths are we going to find in here that make it deservedly part of the Holy Scriptures?
Well, I think that as we go on, we're going to find that Gaius, if not the pastor of the church, at least a leader in the church. And I think he is a pastor here. But we will find that he has a contentious person on his hands that he's got to deal with. And he needs some encouragement. And that's what John seems to be offering here in a minute here, right?
Is that where you're going? Interesting. Okay. All right. We'll come to that in a minute then. Yeah, I've got a little bit different take, but
all right.
But that I think that just kind of goes to show how a little bit difficult to sort this letter out as to exactly what's going on because we don't have a lot of detail. So, but here's what I do want to say. So the story thus far is right. Gaius, you're doing great. I really am happy about everything that everyone's told me about you. And he's also got reports. John, the elder, has reports coming to him about Gaius. And the reports have said, this is a good and faithful brother. He walks in the truth.
Right. Right.
Yep. So these brothers, I've got some ideas about who they are too. Can we read on really quick?
Yes, beloved, it is a faithful thing you do in all your efforts for these brothers, strangers as they are, who testified to your love before the church. You will do well to send them on their journey in a manner worthy of God, for they have gone out for the sake of the name, accepting nothing from the Gentiles. Therefore, we ought to support people like these, that we may be fellow workers for the truth. And shall we keep going, or is that...
There's a lot of stuff stacked in there. A lot of stuff stacked in there. First off, so if we really carefully pick through these things, first off, verse 5, it is a faithful thing you do in all your efforts for these brothers, strangers as they are. So these brothers are strangers to Gaius. He does not know them personally, and yet he is doing something for them. And what he does it faithfully. So, yes, and there we go. So we'll come up on hold that. The next verse, these same brothers testified to your love before the church. So again, they are witnessing to John the elder that Gaius, great faithful guy. And then apparently, remainder of verse 6, when John says, you will do well to send them on their journey in a manner worthy of God. Well, now we're getting the impression that who these brothers are most likely missionaries, let's say. They are people who are appointed, maybe even ordained by the church, and they are sent out to proclaim the gospel as they go. Now, whether they're on a missionary journey like the Apostle Paul was, that's probably what it was, or maybe they're going to like a specific church. They still need support on their way there. And Gaius is the guy who is supporting them.
I do not have my Greek in front of me, Troy. Back up in verse 1. Does it start with presbyteros?
Ha presbyteros Gaio.
Yeah. Okay. So he identifies himself as elder or presbyter, as we would say, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that this is really kind of falling in line with these are ones that John has probably ordained and sent as evangelists and as church planters, as missionaries, as it were, as you're pointing out.
Yeah.
And they have been treated, you will do well to send them on their journey in a manner worthy of God, for they have gone out for the sake of the name, that being the name of Christ, the name of God, accepting nothing from the Gentiles. What do you make about that? Nothing from the Gentiles.
Well, Gentiles means a bunch of different things in the New Testament. But if you kind of boil it all down, it ends up being Gentiles, not the people of God. So they didn't accept anything. So nobody who's not from the people of God, how do I say that in good English? That would actually be perfectly fine in Greek, by the way, to just double negative all over the place, but not in English. So they did not accept any money from outside the church. They didn't take any support from outside the church. So here's what it was.
This would not be from non-Jews, but non-Christians.
Yeah, non-Christians, right? Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so pagans.
Yeah.
Right?
So hey, and just an old thing that an old preacher said once that's really stuck with me over the years. Not everybody is called to go, but if you're not called to go, you are called to send. And so here is an example of that, where John the elder is saying to Gaius, "This is your task to send these men, and you support them." So, and by the way, then that also is true then too, that God's mission is made possible by the gifts of God's people. We don't look to the world to say, "Hey, world, can you finance the work we are doing?" But rather we look for the gifts of the faithful to finance what God is doing. And that's precisely what's going on here. These missionaries, they haven't accepted anything from the world, but rather they're just receiving support from the church.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
so we should support people like these.
We should support good and faithful. Well, okay. Now there's a good question. Can I skip to the left, just 2 quick steps? Right.
Sure.
So there's this early Christian document called the Didache, which is quite fascinating. It depends on who you are, what kind of scholar you're reading. This booklet rather, can date into the late period of the apostles. So maybe mid first century, mid to mid-late first century, right? And what the Didache is basically a book of instruction. It's not quite right to call it the earliest church planting manual, but that's good enough. You'll get the sense of what it is. And in the Didache, there's also specific directions about how to treat Christians who just kind of show up on your doorstep. So, not uncommon at all. So, there's no Airbnb in this day, right? There's no Uber. If you're traveling through, you have a couple options. You can shell out a bunch of money for basically a hotel and get some food there, but they might also offer you a girl for rent, if you know what I mean. And if you don't really want to deal with that, you then maybe, as a Christian, might find a local church, or you might find some local Christians and say, hey, I'm just traveling through. I'm a brother in Christ. Would you mind putting me up for a day or two? And the Didache addresses that. And the Didache would then also have us be really careful about who we support and for how long. Oh boy. See, here's the sickness kicking in because I have no idea where I was going with this. The point is, however, I think that so there's directions in the Didache for reception of Christians. There's the directions in the Didache for the reception of apostles, and then the support of prophets. Any Christian, according to the Didache, any apostle that actually asks for money as they go out, they're false apostles. Don't support them. Any Christian who wants to just kind of keep sponging off you, he's no true Christian. Don't support him any longer. If he wants to stay with you, he gets a job. A prophet, if a prophet wants to come and live with you and basically be your pastor, as it were, he's worthy of support. He's worthy of support. Yes, go ahead.
Well, I was about to say, I think we talked about this back when we were talking about judges, that it was not uncommon in the culture of those days where you would go to a public place if you were a sojourner, a traveler, and it was almost incumbent on people to take you in. It was part of their code of conduct, of ethics, that they would take you in, they would give you refuge, they would give you food, and so forth and so on. And so I think that in the church, it was also very common that would be at least intensified with the hospitality and that sort of thing also.
Yes.
So that would be very common. But then when you find that someone is a Christian brother and that they've been sent by possibly one of the apostles and that they are out building the church and so forth and so on, I would assume that you would probably find the faithful in the area and take up a collection for the guy.
Sure.
And want to bless and build churches and that sort of things.
But go ahead.
But on the other hand, he doesn't come and say, "Give me money," so that we can build more churches or anything. That's kind of not kosher.
And there's something too. I think that every single pastor who's listening to us now knows. There are people who gladly trade upon Christ's name.
Yeah.
So basically, I would guess a good 95% of the time that someone has come to church to hit me up for money, they make it clear that, oh, I'm a Christian too. Oh, are you?
Yeah, right.
Where do you go to church? I just such and such. Well, who's your pastor? Yeah, but I'm a Christian, so you should give me money. And there are people like that in the ancient world too, right?
Yeah.
And,
well, I feel a little awkward having been a missionary and spoken at hundreds of churches, and I got very comfortable at saying, will you support this work that we're doing here financially?
And that's good and right.
We need X amount of money to make this happen.
Right. Well, and that's exactly the type of guy that John the Elder is writing to Gaius about. He's writing about Craig Donofrio. That's what he's doing. Craig Donofrio, the missionary. Well, and for that matter, he could be writing about a 4-year radio, the mission work, right? Are these people doing faithful things? Are they doing things that that the church has given them to do? Yeah, it's good and right to support them. Is it people who just want to trade off the name of Christ and make a profit? Then don't support them. By the way, that's really fun.
Okay.
By the way, the words profit and profit.
That's just the Robitussin talking.
Oh my goodness, yeah. I actually said something about it in my dissertation, though. It's just the way those two words sound exactly the same, or it's some much deserved mockery in of certain sectors of the church. Anyway, so we ought to support people like these. John says, the fellow workers for the truth, but with that also kind of a warning. Hey, we're not supporting false brothers. We're not supporting false teachers.
Right.
We do our best to support the good teachers. And the good teachers because they have come probably with a letter of authority from John the Elder. They've come with their papers. They've come with their papers.
Right.
Yeah. Yep.
They got their bona fides.
Yeah. And by the way, too, while we're there, I think that's also another piece of the picture there too, is that any true preacher, any true pastor or missionary has some bona fides, as you say.
Right.
They've got some paperwork. Somebody somewhere in the church has said, this is a legitimate teacher. If I look up my wall, I've got not only degrees, but I've got an ordination certificate in which leaders and teachers of the church said, Troy Neer, maybe he's not the best pastor, but at least we know he's faithful.
Yeah, I always love that, there we are with our 4-year college degree and then our 4-year graduate degrees. And we come out all full of vim and vigor, and we get a certificate that says, we have achieved the minimum knowledge, the minimum required knowledge to be a pastor. It's like, wow. After all that, we are now minimally educated to be a pastor.
But the thing is that the church, in that though, the church has put their stamp of approval upon us as teachers of the word. John, in writing to Gaius, has put his stamp of approval upon these certain missionaries that Gaius should support. Again, not everybody. Verse 9 gets into that.
Time is running short. Are we going to do this in 2 episodes or 1?
No, we can rock it through really quick.
All right. You lead the way, Sabu.
All right. Verse 9, I have written something to the church, but Diotrephes, who likes to put himself first, does not acknowledge our authority. So if I come, I'll bring up what he is doing, talking wicked nonsense against us. And not content with that, he refuses to welcome the brothers and also stops those who want to and puts them out of the church. Beloved, do not imitate evil, but imitate good. Whoever does good is from God. Whoever does evil has not seen God. Demetrius has received a good testimony from everyone and from the truth itself. We also add our testimony, and you know that our testimony is true. Okay, so pause.
Yeah.
Here's that thing. Good pastors, bad pastors. Good church leaders, bad church leaders. Diotrephes is a bad church leader. How do we know?
Well, he was putting himself first.
Bing. There you go. That's like number one top priority indicator right there that someone is a bad church leader. They love to put themselves first.
Right.
I cannot think of a single good pastor that I've ever known that stood up proudly and say, I deserve to be a pastor because I'm so holy. No. Every good pastor I've ever known has always said the same thing. I'm not sure I deserve to be doing this, and yet I'm called, and I sure hope I don't mess it up.
Right.
Luther had a great
prayer. I don't know about you, Troy, but before I enter the pulpit, I stand in front of the altar and I always pray, basically, Lord, get me out of the way of your word. Please don't let me get in the way.
There's a couple variations on what's called Luther's sacristy prayer. So sacristy is the room just off of the side of the church, like that pastors will put their robes on and stuff like that. And in one of those versions of Luther's sacristy prayer, he prays something to the effect of, Lord, if I had been left to myself, I would have messed all this up a long time ago.
Yep.
So please, you do your thing, and I'll try to do my part. But it all really comes down to you. Diotrephes, however, though, likes to put himself first. He does not acknowledge John the bishop's authority. And if we're calling this guy the Apostle John, he's not acknowledging the apostle's authority. That's a pretty steep order.
Yeah, well, what does John know? He only walked with Jesus for like 3 years. I mean, what could he know?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, so anytime you've got valid church leadership, if you've got some levels of authority there, like let's say your pastor, that is someone God has put there to be a faithful teacher. And if they're a faithful teacher, you owe them your respect. But Diotrephes says, hey, I'm better than all that. Go ahead.
Yeah, Diotrephes is like, hey, I got ordained online with the Universal Whole Life Church, and I paid $12. And so I'm ordained, so I'm just as good as he is.
Just as good as, yes. He's a just as good.
Right?
He's a just as gooder. Yeah, my ordination is just as good as those guys.
I can do weddings. I can legally do weddings just like John.
Oh my gosh, you just hit my trigger right there. Okay, let's move on. Let's move on. Yes. So notice what Diotrephes is doing, though. He's not content with talking wicked nonsense against John and his group. He's also refusing to welcome the brothers, probably the very same brothers that John is upholding and commending. Mm-hmm. And whoever does want to welcome them and support them as missionaries, Diotrephes stops them and he puts them out of the church. He excommunicates these people. Mm. Mm-hmm. This is a guy who wants nothing more than control over his little section of Christianity.
Yeah.
He doesn't want the kingdom of Christ. He wants the kingdom of Diotrephes. And John the Elder is right to smack him down.
Yep. That's the long and short of it right there.
In contrast to Diotrephes, we've got a name Demetrius.
Right.
So, Demetrius, just like today, very common name.
Yes, I know many Demetriuses because I watch Cobra Kai.
Demetrii?
On there.
You know many Demetrii? Yes.
Yeah, that would be plural, wouldn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so actually, I'm getting silly again. Oh, good grief. Both for Gaius and Demetrius, we bump into these names elsewhere in the scriptures. I don't think there's nothing that insists that these all be the same people that we bump into elsewhere. So Gaius that John writes to is probably not the same Gaius that Paul speaks of in Romans. Demetrius is probably not the same Demetrius who's in Ephesus and originally was a silversmith. Stuff like that. So probably nothing like that going on here. But the thing is, Demetrius, nevertheless, is someone who has a good testimony from everyone and from the truth itself. So in other words, he's done what the Apostle Paul has advised, and he's shown himself to be a workman approved who can handle the word of Scriptures properly. So Demetrius has a fine and good standing amongst the brothers of the church. And therefore, he's someone to imitate. Diotrephes,
and John says, so say we all. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Diotrephes.
And then basically we have John wrapping it up, verses 13 through 15. And I kind of like this because it reminds me so much of business correspondence that I've had. I had much to write to you, but I'd rather not write with pen and ink. I hope to see you soon, and we will talk face to face. Peace be with you, or peace be to you. The friends greet you. Greet the friends each by name. John. I kind of get the feeling that I don't want to say a whole lot more on ink and paper because I really don't want Diotrephes to get a hold of this and just start twisting things And I've said what I've said, and that's enough. Less is more, right?
Yes.
Kind of, sort of thing.
Yeah. Some things are better said in person, right?
Right.
And now this is definitely true. Then as it is now, and Paul even complains about this. In one of his writings, I believe, to the Corinthians, I wish I were there face to face with you, so I could change my tone, and you could hear what I'm truly trying to say. And so just like today, you write a text, write an email, and someone misunderstands it completely because they either read into or don't read the proper tone. And John has some stuff like that he'd like to say. Pen and ink are insufficient.
I'm sure in the original there were several emojis in there and that sort of thing, but
yes.
Too bad we don't have that original text. Smiley faces and whatnot. All right, we're way over time. Troy, I hope you feel better, and you take care of yourself. And to all the rest of you, and to Troy, peace be with you. We'll catch you next time. For You Radio is a 1517.org production. To listen to this radio broadcast and broadcasts like this one, I invite you to visit 1517.org. There you will also find many publications and free resources, including classes on Christian apologetics, church history, philosophy, and so much more. We are completely funded by generous donors like you. Would you consider making a generous gift to our work of spreading the gospel? Simply visit 1517.org.